Okay, so here are some out-of-the-box ideas for beating writer's block.
Okay.
Number one, write what one character thinks about another character. Okay? And this specifically, taking two characters that you haven't, that have maybe been introduced, have maybe come together, but don't necessarily have business thinking about each other in terms of the narrative. For instance, just getting into Lord of the Rings, right? Getting into Gimli's head and just writing what Gimli thinks about Merry.
Right.
That's it. Just like, man, that boy-man halfling smokes a lot.
Right.
Just whatever Gimli would think, that kind of stuff. Or what does your villain think of the main character's love interest, and just writing that out, like, as either as a narrator or the actual character's, as the actual character's thoughts and feelings. That
it sounds to me kind of like just spending time with your characters. Like right, or not even about what other characters, like, what does your main character think about that flower, or this, where they live, or what do they think about that group of people, or their job that they do,
or the mountains, or the job that they do,
like just writing their thoughts. And I think if you write it about other characters and then you kind of flip it around and that character writes about, that's a really great way to at least get to know because I do think I've run into this a lot where I'm writing and then I realize I get writer's block not because I don't have any creativity. I get writer's block because, like, I don't know enough about what the world looks like. I don't know enough about how this culture functions. I don't know enough about what this character thinks about stuff. Like, it's like a lack of information more than I'm just stuck and don't know what to do. So then if I stop and I spend time, like you're saying, where you're like writing the history of the character or writing what the character thinks about certain things, like it helps you get to know the character more and then move forward.
Yeah. And usually for me, when I do that, it just triggers some other stuff, maybe in my current, where I am in the book. But I'll just save those. So you use Notion, and you're really good at Notion. I do not, and so
it has confused your simple mind many times.
It has, however. So what I will do is when I'm writing, I just put it after what I'm currently writing, and then as I write, it just pushes everything down, and then when I'm like, this is the perfect spot for it, and then I'll flip it up, and then I'll keep writing and stuff. So like, if this is my novel, I have a good this much of just stuff just ahead of it that I'm like, I could use that at some point. And it's not organized. It's like setups and payoffs and progresses.
Or just random ideas and...
It's just random ideas, but I have all of that in my head, but it's like I took it from my head and wrote it down.
Yeah.
But anyway, so that's number one. That's how that's one way of getting out of writer's block. The second one, the second out of the box idea for beating writer's block is to write what a character thinks about an important person, place, or thing, which we already kind of talked about.
Yeah.
Just really getting into the mind of the character. The next one, and this is probably the one that I think is the best as an exercise, but you have the most fun with. And it's number 3, make your character commit an awkward mistake and recover. And it could be anything from, I think the most common one that I see is a character walks up and there's an NPC that's just yelling and is irate and all this stuff, and the character's like, ma'am, please calm down. Who you calling ma'am?
Right.
Like, and it's just like, oh, my bad. It's just like, sir, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Things like that, or tripping, or falling, or dropped a glass, at a very embarrassing moment, like you're meeting the queen and your sword falls out of its sheath, something like that, just a little embarrassing, because you get to see your character in an awkward social thing where they did mess up. How do they react to that? Because if you had, say, like Brahm from Aragon, right, he's a strong mentor, he would be able to save face really quickly.
Right.
He'd be really elegant about it. Aragon, same book, it would go badly for Aragon.
Yeah, I think
So,
that's just
yeah.
it's a different way of exploring the character where, like what we were talking about before, is like they're talking about like what they think about certain things, but what you think about certain things and then what you actually do in your real life can be very different. So you can, I think that's a great way to like discover the two sides of your character, the kind of conscious and the subconscious, where it's like in their brain they act like or think that they would be super heroic, and then they get into a situation where they need to be heroic, and they're not heroic.
It does not work out.
So that is a really good
Right.
it's like two sides of the same coin kind of a thing.
And I think embarrassment specifically helps. It brings out a character's negative thoughts, and how well do
Because then
do
they
that? What do
could
they
become
have to do?
self-deprecating. They could they start put themselves down. They're trying to they feel stupid. They all those kinds of things. Yeah.
It can put them in a bad mood, and maybe you want your character in a bad mood. That'd be a great way to do it, So yeah, so that's number 3.
Well, and that kind of too speaks to like one of the things you told me you always used to criticize my writing on very early on was like my characters never had any flaws. Like we just walked
Right.
through the story and everyone did everything perfectly how they were supposed to do it.
Yep.
But you were constantly like, where's the flaws? Where's the flaws? And that's a way to find them is like, how do they react in certain situations? Or when their mother-in-law walks in the room, is that a good thing? Is that a bad thing? Is that a terrifying thing? Like how do they, do they get choked
Right.
up and can't hardly speak, or do they get angry, or are they super happy? Like what's their reaction to any of those types of events?
Right. Which actually comes into number 4, which is the fourth out-of-the-box way of getting out of writer's block is have your character attempt a new skill and fail. And the more necessary, the better.
Yeah.
Like you have to figure out how to pick a lock. Even though you can't, you have to figure out how to do it because it's your part of the plan. You have to be able to pick a lock.
Right.
And just show an epic failure of that, or you have to make a sword,
Yeah. Well, you see that a lot in like fantasy and stuff. That's pretty common because like in my story, for example, especially in the first book, there's kind of a certain type of magic that's being birthed for the first time. And so that's going to put the main character in like, they go from not having these powers to having them. But there's no one around to teach her because it's new.
Right.
So she is the one who has to figure it out. It's like the first person having these powers kind of a thing. And then, yeah, it becomes like you basically end up in that situation constantly of how do you do this? How do I do that? Imagine like the very first wizard in the Harry Potter world.
Figuring it out.
Confundio, maybe. Like, how do they come up with the spells and the things that they do, or how do they build a sword?
all the hijinks.
Like I've never built a sword. I don't.
I'm sure you'd fail.
I probably would.
And I think that's a great way to also to have like some negative effects. If you need something to happen in the plot, but you want it to be your character's fault, just link it to maybe an innocent failure, So, but that's what I'm talking about. Like, do this as an exercise, and then you'll start thinking about your characters in a different way.
Yeah.
Which,
And I would like to do, Just because you do these exercises, they don't have to become part of your story.
No.
Even the flaws you come up with, or even the like things you discover, they don't have to become part of it either. It's just a way to find new directions to go. You know?
And I think you get into the minds of your characters better, so that when something like that comes up, you know how they would react in that situation already. And you may not even realize that you're doing it. You're just like, this is how they would react in that situation.
Right.
You know? And then the fifth out-of-the-box idea for beating writer's block, I have what would be good news and what would be bad news for your character to hear right now. Somebody walks into the room.
Declare
You've got
something.
News, and it could be anything from the Archduke cupcakes were burnt in the oven.
Right.
What are we going to do? Or it could be, I just found out I'm going to be a father.
Right.
And it's some other character.
Right.
You know, like, what would that look like?
Then that could be an
Yeah.
interesting exercise for your villain. Because, like, news would be different to different people. So, like, you know, the cupcakes being burnt is going to be bad news to the baker, but it could be good news to the baker's competition. You know?
Yeah.
So,
And if you want to figure out where you want to go with the plot, this could be a really great way. Write one scene where the villain gets good news or the villain gets bad news. They're the same thing, just different. Just try it out, see which one you like. You know, that would probably be really good for pantsers. You know,
yeah.
so
Which
yeah,
I do some pantsing, but I'm much more of an outliner these days. I
Yeah,
pants
same.
my way through the outline.